Welcome, viewers around the world. We're glad you could join us for the World Bank Group IMF Spring Meetings and for this event, the Digital Revolution, Fostering Inclusion and Resilient Growth. I'm Lana Wong, and I'm coming to you live from the World Bank Group's headquarters in Washington, D.C. 2 years after the onset of COVID-19, it is clear that some things are here to stay. In addition to its tragic toll on lives and livelihoods, the pandemic has brought about deep changes in the way we all live, the way that companies do business, how governments interact with citizens, and how people communicate with each other. New digital tools were deployed in record time over the past 2 years, often for uses that we had never imagined. They enabled the continuation of businesses and education, allowed governments to provide services, and accelerated the adoption of digital financial tools. As digital technologies develop, they are also expanding inclusion, reaching remote and vulnerable populations, and helping to strengthen resilience to future crises. Digital innovation is driving economic transformation by accelerating connectivity, access to finance, and job creation. These are all important engines of growth, and in times of enormous economic shocks, they are even more relevant. But despite an increase of digital usage during the pandemic, nearly half of the global population is still unconnected. And at the same time, we need to mitigate the risks related to data privacy and cybersecurity. Over the next 90 minutes, we're bringing together a select group of experts to discuss these important issues. Let's take a quick look at what we have lined up for you. Quite the lineup. There are lots of ways for you to participate in this event. It's being streamed in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic at live.worldbank.org. That's also where our experts are answering your questions in the live chat. Here are a few of them already hard at work. Share ideas on the potential of technology to transform economies for the better using the hashtag #PowerOfDigital. You can follow and watch this event on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And before we launch into our first discussion, let's take a closer look at the digital divide. The number of people with access to the internet increased during the pandemic, but that access is not equal. Data shows how the digital divide is actually becoming wider as a result of COVID-19. Let's take a look at the impact on businesses. The World Bank surveyed just under 25,000 firms operating in 38 countries to see how they were being affected by the pandemic. It showed that firms of all sizes were seeking digital solutions for their operations, but there were wide gaps in firms' ability to deploy technology. Let's look at how the investment varies by size of firm. Micro and small firms reported increased investment in digital technology, 15% and 25% respectively. But the share of medium and large firms reporting increased investment in digital technology was quite a bit higher, 34% and 45% respectively. The digital divide is also present in other ways. Worldwide, 76% of people living in cities use the internet compared to just 39% of people in rural areas. While 90% of people in developed countries use the internet, the figure for developing countries was just 57%. And in the least developed countries, it is just 27%. And the gender divide is widest in the least developed countries. 31% of men report using the internet, but just 19% of women. This compares with gender parity in internet usage in the developed countries. How can we address these divides and open digital opportunities for more small firms, more women, and more people living in rural areas? That's the question for our next two guests who have blazed a trail for digital development that drives economic transformation, Omobola Johnson and Michael Miebach. Dr. Johnson is the former Minister of Communication Technology of Nigeria, a current member of the Alliance for Affordable Internet, and a private equity investor. Mr. Mibak is the CEO of MasterCard. Welcome to you both. I'm thrilled that we have you here with us today, and I'm really looking forward to a great conversation. So, Omobola, let's start with you. Nigeria has come a long way in terms of expanding internet connectivity, but there continues to be a persistent gap between the urban and rural populations. How can Nigeria and other countries facing similar challenges help to expand internet access for all?
Thank you very much, Nana. And you're absolutely right. Nigeria has made tremendous progress in terms of expanding connectivity. Today, 2G coverage is 90%, 3G coverage is 80% of the country, and 4G is 70%. But as you say, the gaps, whether it's 10%, 20%, or 30%, those gaps are in the rural areas. And that's where the challenge is, to really get those rural areas connected. But I think what I would like to say is borrow from the term that the Alliance for Affordable Internet uses, and that is a term that is called meaningful connectivity. And that's what we need to be worrying about, not just connecting the rural areas, but ensuring that that connectivity is meaningful. And that means a fast connection, at least 4 gigabytes sort of 4G sort of speed. It means ownership of devices. It means having daily access to the internet for work, for business, for social, for communication. And finally, it means that you have enough data and you can afford that data. Now, to your point around what regulations can we put in place in Nigeria to ensure that everybody has meaningful connectivity, I think there are a number of them. And some of them really, to be fair to Nigeria, we are actually doing some of those things already. Firstly, faster connection, encouraging collaborations between the community networks and the national networks, where the community networks have built towers based on subsidies given by the Universal Service Provision Fund. And the national networks can expand their spectrum, expand their radius, expand their connectivity to those community networks and share revenues based on that. The second thing that we need to do is around smartphone ownership. And that is really, first of all, reducing the taxes, because we import most of the phones that come into this country, reducing the taxes and the duties that are placed on those smartphones, and also actually supporting or encouraging the manufacturing of devices locally, because that takes away the taxes, takes away the customs duties, and really making those smartphones more affordable for the average Nigerian. I think the third thing that we need to do is affordability. And that speaks to the daily access of meaningful connectivity. If it's affordable, people can get on when they want, for as long as they want, and how they want to. So making it more cost effective, rollout considerations, the right of way, all those kind of charges that are placed on telecoms companies to roll out the networks. And also things like data bundles are very important. Zero rating for some of the very important content that we have on the internet, and data bundles that allow you to actually provide those services cheaper. And finally, enough data, having enough spectrum that is affordable, enough spectrum that will enable us to roll out the data requirements, because literally as soon as the data is rolled out, it's all coupled up. But having spectrum available for the telecommunications company, but having it available at a cost that is not as exorbitant as it is now. We just completed our 5G auctions in Nigeria. Nigeria raised about $500 million. And I would put it to the government that if we just saved, a small fraction of those dollars, and instead of having spectrum expensive, making sure that we reduce the cost of spectrum, but then give the national communication companies rollout obligations for getting that spectrum, forcing them to roll out into those rural areas, as opposed to them doing it at their pace, at their time, by partnering with the community networks.
That's great. Thank you. I think your point about meaningful connectivity and also affordability is critical. So that also really brings us down to making it meaningful for the consumers. So let me turn to Michael on that topic. Michael, how can the private sector help bring the innovation and expertise needed to support financial health and prosperity?
I think financial prosperity needs to be the goal that we keep in mind. We were clear as a private sector player that it starts with access to that digital economy. It actually starts with everything Omobola just said. You got to have fundamental access to become online, but then building from there on, what is your access to the digital economy? It was actually here at the World Bank stage, 7 years ago, that we took a leap of faith and we said, well, with 5 billion people not being part of the digital economy, we have to do our part as a private sector player. and we committed to put half a billion people, 500 million people into the digital economy. Fast forwarding into COVID, that was just about the time in 2020 that we had actually delivered against that goal. And building on what Omobola just said, government does its piece, but the private sector comes in and uses the infrastructure, uses the access, uses the spectrum that you just talked about to deliver financial services access, and then start to build towards prosperity. How do we do that? What are some of the learnings? Some of the learnings are that, across the private sector, you need partnerships. I'll give you an example to bring all of this to life. What does financial prosperity mean? With a model at scale, let's go to Egypt. I worked in the Middle East for a long time. One of the largest industries in Egypt is the garment industry, employs 1.5 million workers. The salaries have been given in brown bags. Today, they're coming on a digital wage account. A digital wage account leaves a data trail that allows you to get better access to credit, which will smoothen out purchases you want to do as a family, as an individual, as a small business, and then the virtual circle closes. This is in partnership with Levi's, with a local set of local banks in Egypt. That is a private sector government model at scale, because the garment industry obviously matters in other countries as well, for example, Bangladesh. Now, we've doubled down. We took all of those learnings and we said, well, there's still over 2 billion people that are not in the formal financial system, that are not in the digital economy. What else can we do? We doubled down. We upped the goal to 1 billion. So I hope to be back on your stage at some point in time and said, we achieved that as well, and here are the learnings. But the private sector is critical, because the private sector does look for commercially sustainable models. We cannot rely on grants. The private sector will look, does this make sense? Does it pull other players into the ecosystem? A telco, for example, to provide financial services into rural areas without commercial sustainability is not going to happen. The private sector will look for economies of scale to make it commercially sustainable. The private sector will drive for innovation, leverage technology and competition, and all of that is needed. And that's why I think we are playing a critical role. We want to be a role model.
Fantastic. Well, no, that's why these partnerships, public, private, government, philanthropic, they are critical. So thank you for that. But that does bring us to jobs, job creation. So let's talk about job creation. We know it's not only unemployment that needs to be tackled, but underemployment, which disproportionately affects women. So how can we ensure that women and marginalized populations are included in this new digital economy? Omobola.
Thanks, Lana. I think, first of all, to talk about the structure of an emerging economy that is going digital. If I give the example of Nigeria, which is a proxy for most African economies, where most of the jobs are created by small and micro businesses. In Nigeria, for example, 40% of the GDP is contributed by small and medium scale businesses. 90% of businesses are micro, small, and medium, and 84% of jobs are in these small and medium scale businesses. So to unlock this sort of job creation, whether it's for women and men, and I'll speak about women in a minute, to unlock the capacity for job creation in any economy, any emerging economy, you've got to figure out, how do I scale these micro and small businesses? These are businesses that there's tremendous fragmentation. As I said, in Nigeria, we have 20 million of them, each employing less than 10 million people. They're fragmented, they're small, they are ignored because you just can't serve them because they just don't have the capacity for scale. And so being able to unlock what is in those SMEs is important. And the way that we're seeing that, and I speak as a venture capital investor now, is around companies that are serving those small businesses. They're the companies that we call the B to small b, not B to B, but B to small b. And these are companies that are aggregating the demand of small-scale businesses and using technology to provide services to meet that demand and allow them to scale and to grow. And to explain this better, to illustrate this point better, let me speak about Trigger, one of our portfolio companies. Trigger is a company in Nairobi that serves what we call tabletop entrepreneurs, small-scale retailers, the way that Africans shop for food. We don't go to hypermarkets or the Tesco's or the Sainsbury's of this world. We shop in small corner shops, tabletop entrepreneurs, people that put their wares by the roadside. This is how we shop. And Trigger is addressing, and these are all entrepreneurs, they're all small-scale entrepreneurs. Trigger has served over 130,000 of these small-scale entrepreneurs. And how do they do that? they're able to deliver fresh produce and dry goods to those 130,000 entrepreneurs across Kenya simply by them ordering or via a mobile app. So they place their orders for bananas, flour, oil, whatever it is. The produce is delivered to them as opposed to them going to the market. Secondly, they pay. Of course, everybody knows about M-Pesa, so let's just say mobile money. They pay with mobile money. With those payments in mobile money and payment for the goods in mobile money and also selling the goods with mobile money, there is now digital transparency. So there's transparency on their cash flows. We know how much they buy, we know how much they sell. Trigger is then able to offer working capital to these sort of informal retailers because they understand how their money flows, and they know that they can actually develop a credit score based on the flow of capital, flow of money in these businesses. Now, the point about saying all this, most of these tabletop entrepreneurs, most of these retail small-scale entrepreneurs are women, and they have been largely excluded from this digital economy. But this is one way of including them by allowing them to buy their produce online, accept payments and make payments online, and offer them much needed capital online as well to be able to scale and grow their businesses. There are many more examples like this. If I can just have a minute to just give another example of another of our portfolio companies, which is Pula. Pula offers insurance to small-scale farmers, basically reducing their vulnerability by insuring them if their crops fail. So if their crops fail, they get an insurance payout. These are millions of farmers. No major insurance company wants to deal with one farmer that is producing 2 hectares of maize. But Pula aggregates all these farmers, does all the actuarial calculations, and puts them in front of insurance companies, and they can then insure them and reduce their vulnerability. Again, Alana, half the entrepreneurs, small-scale farmers, are women in this part of the world, in Africa and specifically in Nigeria. So these are the ways. It's really around private capital, to Michael's point, private capital, really providing capital to companies that are looking to serve these small-scale entrepreneurs, where most of our jobs are created and most people work in Africa and Nigeria in particular. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Omobola. I actually lived in Kenya, in Nairobi, for 5 years and spent a lot of time working in Mathare. So I do know the kind of trajectory of the whole M-Pesa success and the digital economy. So let's hope that we can just keep that moving forward. But let's turn to Michael now. Related to all of that, I guess, of course, COVID has shown us with increased urgency the need to tackle this digital divide. So what are some concrete, actionable ways to narrow that divide, and what do you think are the greatest threats that we need to address?
Thank you, Lana. So since we're all exchanging our street cred on how we're involved with the continent, for example, so I've been involved with Africa for 10 years, in Kenya, in Nigeria, and other places. And the inequalities that COVID highlighted, they were there all along. COVID put a stark light on them and accelerated some of them. I think that is what's happening. To turn this into a positive, this is a golden opportunity for us to take those learnings and make sure that all the goodness that comes out of a race towards a more digital life is actually taken, but we avoid some of the downsides to your questions of threats. The digital divide is a reality. So what do we do? What do we do to avoid that people who are in the digital economy, who are the digital haves, have a whole set of better choices than the digital have-nots? I mean, that is just not how the world can work. If everybody's in, that will be good for us, and then if not everybody is in, that will not be good of us. Now, be very practical. Everything I just said, that there might not be an answer, but fortunately there are answers because we have been working on it. And to look at this through 4 dimensions, really, starting off with technology. We're a tech company, and I believe in technology, and I believe in technology being something good that can actually help address some of these issues. The examples that Omobola just talked through, Trigger, for example, Pula, those are technological solutions. They're provided by fintechs that are out there today in our industry, and the creativity of all these engineers can be helped with if a company like us provides a base for them to unfold all of their creativity, meaning we have digital tools that matter for everybody. For example, cybersecurity tools. How does the small business actually get online and can compete in that kind of a market? Yes, it's that one app, but how do you actually get online? How do you build a website? How is this all very straightforward? Once you're online, how do you find new customers? How do you keep your business safe? Because there's cybersecurity threats out there. So there's a whole range of standard solutions that we provide to the world of the triggers and the poolers and other people around there, and other players in our industry do the same. If I look across the board, there's a PayPal, there's other people who focus on enabling the ecosystem so the ecosystem can help all of those small businesses, which make up 90% of all businesses around the world. So that's point number one on technology. Point number two is, I think it is important that more companies come to the conclusion that I just put up as such an easy statement: if everybody thrives, then we all thrive. If that is not a realization in the private sector, then that's problematic. With the focus of the investor base to say we will invest and put our money into companies that actually value ESG, that are putting out reporting on ESG and all of that, I think that mindset needs to be propagated, and more companies need to do that, and we will want to continue to be a role model. So technology, mindset, focus on sustainability and inclusive growth is important. The third dimension that I think is important here is back to partnerships. This issue of the digital divide is so big, nobody can solve this by themselves. Government cannot, private sector cannot, NGOs cannot, but across the board we can. The Egypt example that I gave is one that cuts across the board, and these public-private partnerships are important. That's an important element of the whole mix. The last one is, it comes to your question of threats. There is a starting point of eyeing technology with some skepticism. Where is my data? Is my data safe? Where is my money? Is my money safe? If I have it under the mattress, I can see it, I can feel it. If it's somewhere in an app, I'm not quite sure. So we need to deal with this trust deficit. We need to really focus on creating digital trust. And this is done in a few ways, making sure that from a cybersecurity side, things are clear and things are safe. There's a lot of technology to do that today, and it doesn't have to be cumbersome, biometrical security. There's all sorts of things that can be put to play. But I think that mindset of realizing that people are skeptical, and you have to address it from the outset so that you can leverage technology because people trust it, I think it's important. The second aspect is around data. So the digital haves are the people that can put their data, their own data, to their own good to get better choices and better services. So people will only do that if they know that their data is treated safely. So data principles, as simple as my data is good for my own use and I should benefit from it, and the industry, my government, MasterCard, Trigger, somebody will make sure that it's always safe. We put out these data principles and said that is something that everybody should subscribe to. We invited other private sector players to say keeping data safe and in focus is important. Across these four dimensions, tech, ESG mindset, partnerships, and trust, if we pull that off, that's pretty concrete. It's not easy to do, but I think we have enough learning of being on this journey for the last 10 years that we can pull this off. And now is the golden moment with this race towards a more digital life. We should do it now.
We couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Omobola and Michael. Thank you so much for telling us how we can accelerate this digital revolution to include everyone.
Hello, I'm Shigulta Sharia in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and you are watching World Bank Group IMF Spring Meetings.
What an engaging discussion. Technology can really magnify the impact of economic reforms, and both the private and the public sectors have a role to play. We heard how companies drive the innovation needed to close access gaps, while well-crafted policies and regulatory frameworks must be in place for that to happen. If you're just joining us, I'm Lana Wong, and you're watching the Spring Meetings event on the digital revolution, fostering inclusion and resilient growth. In a moment, we'll hear from the president of the World Bank Group, David Malpass, in conversation with Paul Kagame, the Rwandan president. But before that, a reminder that you can join the conversation on today's event at any time using the hashtag #PowerOfDigital. We're also inviting you to take part in a special poll. We want to know which digital transformation you think is the most critical to accelerate resilient and inclusive growth. Option A is e-government and digital IDs. If you think fintech and digital payments are the priority, it's option B. Or is it C, digital infrastructure and internet access? And your last option is D, EdTech and digital skills. So which of these digital transformations is most critical to accelerate resilient and inclusive growth? You can cast your vote right now at live.worldbank.org, and we'll bring you the results at the end of this event. We're going to hear now about the progress in Rwanda's digital journey. The president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, joins the World Bank Group president, David Malpass, to share his insights on digital transformation. Over to you, David.
Hello to everyone. I want to welcome President Kagame of Rwanda. He's joining us from Kigali. Digitalization is a critical part of development, and it's also an important part of our spring meetings this year. So I'm very pleased to have President Kagame. Rwanda has been in the advance of pushing digital technologies both in Rwanda and in the region. It's a way to enhance people's lives, to increase connectivity, and I want to welcome President Kagame to our meeting today. President?
President Malpass, thank you very much. Much appreciated. First of all, David, I'm happy to be here with you for this conversation.
Let's start off. We know that it's important for people around Rwanda. You've managed to expand the broadband coverage, the digital services coverage. What do you view as key steps that made it possible in Rwanda? Was it infrastructure, the building of infrastructure? Was it the regulatory authorities that were improved? What are the key steps? And then I'm going to ask the same for other countries in Africa. Any advice that you want to give to countries that are pushing forward with their digitalization? Over to you.
Thank you. I respond to that in general terms, covering the broader question you've asked. Over the years, Africa's digital transformation has been driven in particular by mobile financial services. Africa is in many ways a global pioneer in this sector. 80% of Africa's population has a mobile phone, but not everyone has access to high-speed internet on a smartphone. Yet, broadband is the key to unlocking digital transformation. On our continent, a major challenge continues to be the insufficient reach of fiber optic cables in rural areas. So if we address this, means that the majority of Africa's population does not have access to high-speed internet, as you rightly mentioned, and therefore these are key areas to focus on in dealing with the matter. In Rwanda, we have made a significant investment in broadband infrastructure. We have been able to reach over 95% broadband coverage. If you look at our country health sector, for example, most of the facilities in Rwanda are connected to the internet, just to give that example. I should add that, therefore, our partnership with the World Bank has helped us to tackle digital barriers, and I wanted to take this opportunity to appreciate you, President Malpass, and the World Bank for having been of great help in this.
Thank you very much for that. We want to push forward with that in your neighbors and in Africa as a whole. I was very interested as you described the financial transactions and the payment systems as being the backbone. We find in many countries that people are eager to use and to make digital transactions. It's a way of having a very inexpensive form of services, payment for services and for goods. So can I drill down on that a little bit? The Rwandan franc is unique to Rwanda. So how do you envision the importance of cross-border payments. If someone drives a truck across a border, they're not able to use the same digital payment system. Do you think that will evolve? And is it important that there be a single currency, or how will that evolve, do you think?
It will evolve. There has been effort across the region during the integration process of a region. For example, if you take the East African community, there has been harmonization of a number of things, including looking at, therefore, how that can be served to the point that from one place to another, it's like moving within a country in itself. So the East African community has more or less come closer together in a sense that it becomes one big country that brings the number of countries that are partner states together. So I think that is well underway. It's being discussed. It's looking at how we can even have monetary union. Under that, therefore, different harmonization activities and services will be undertaken to ease on the movement, and therefore the currencies and the payment within the payment system as it is.
I imagine that as there's more and more trade across borders among the East African countries, that will also draw along the idea of transactions that are accepted in the various countries. Mr. President, as you think about the challenges within Rwanda, around the world, privacy is one of the issues that people consider. How do people store data safely? How do they avoid surveillance of their own data? I wonder your thoughts on that, and also this challenge around the world of having all information available to people. There are some countries that are really closing the internet to certain flows of information. What do you think about those issues?
Well, first of all, one has to be aware of the risks involved with these new technologies. And therefore, people have to take steps to make sure that risks are mitigated, but at the same time, harness the productivity and efficiencies and all the values entailed in these new technologies. And therefore, people have to think about safety in all forms indeed, and being aware of the risks, of course. So within our own system, for example, in Rwanda, we officially launched recently in Kigali, the first center of the fourth industrial revolution in Africa, in partnership with the World Economic Forum. This helps us to have a full grasp of the issues and therefore maximize on the benefits and also minimize on the risks, as well as in between allowing for the freedoms to do with the management of data and allowing people to freely reap benefits from that. So it's really, I think it will be built on how people come together to discuss this, put necessary laws in place, not only just nationally, but rather regionally, and also learning from the best practices across the globe. It's not an easy thing, but I think it is doable. It has just to be driven by the right politics as well, so that people understand the benefits this is to people, but also allow freedoms to prevail within, but at the same time manage these risks involved. For example, Let me give example. Last year, Rwanda adopted a personal data protection and privacy law, and the center played an instrumental role in its development. So there are these laws that are being developed to make sure that data protection is of essence, and it will also allow fostering of trust, which will in turn promote innovation and facilitate cross-border data flows.
Do you have advice for other parts of Africa on things that you would urge them to do? And it can be with your neighbors as well. With Kenya, do you have good connection, and can it be expanded? How do you see that working, and what advice do you have for anyone at large, including me?
The more we expand, countries getting together, the benefit of that is it's not just the big market that we are all interested in, which is, of course, extremely important, but it's also how we can learn from each other, we can benefit each other, we can work together to address these challenges. Again, learning from the best practices that are out there. And all that is necessary is to be frank with each other. We tell people, we discuss the importance of governance, the importance of putting people's interests here at the heart of what we are doing. And whether it is Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, DRC, I mentioned, we want to make sure that the strengths we have, the resources that are in abundance benefit our citizens. However, this potential will only be realized if there is adequate funding from investors and international financial institutions, particularly for early stage ventures, because most of the efforts we see are by small, medium enterprises, and there is always lack of funding for them be able to accelerate what they are doing. So it's a cross-section of things really that we have to be looking at. It's governance, it's connectivity, it's funding, it's making sure that this market reaches its full potential in what it can do for the people of our countries.
And I was pleased to read about the summit that the meetings that you had in early April in Nairobi, and the connection to Democratic Republic of Congo is going to be important because of the size of that market. So the progress you're making, I think, is very important. I'll ask two questions. Are there applications that you yourself like that you see emerging in Rwanda? How do you use the internet yourself in your daily activities?
Well, we've been learning a lot, and not the least recently during COVID. There are so many technologies, applications that help connect people with whatever they want, wherever it is. And that's how people have even embraced working from home, and education delivered to homes as well, because kids were not able to go to school. Health services benefiting from all these kinds of applications. And for me personally, the most important thing is not only to be to work together, but also deliver of information that is required or provision of that whenever you need it. And so that life becomes as normal as possible, even with the absence of what we have been used to in daily work. So I use a lot. We are on social media. We have, use emails. We use, virtual technologies to just get what you want to obtain, and also do as much work as you can. From any place, you reach whatever you want and wherever you want it. So that's what I can say. And of course, it has provided our young people who are innovative this possibility to go out and address these problems that the society is facing, and also off of that make money and be able to do a number of things. I think we can't complain, but rather just be prepared for the next challenge.
That's exactly right. And we see different uses in different countries, which is, of course, the huge benefit of digitalization. I'll mention the World Bank works through in the private sector through the International Finance Corporation, IFC. We've been active in Rwanda and in neighboring countries through IFC and helping small and medium-sized businesses have more access to funding and also to innovation platforms, which has been so important in pushing along the windows of digitalization. Also, government services are increasingly provided through the internet, and that provides one more platform or support for the investments that are needed. So my sense is there are now so many services being provided across the internet that it pays for the investments that countries are making. So we find that regulatory advances are one of the critical enabling steps for countries as they consider the internet. And I think some of the biggest advances can be in physical trade across borders and in digital trade across borders and payment systems. Can you describe the physical trade that's going on and whether digitalization is going to help it advance?
I think there is no conflict really between the physical aspects of that trade and the digital aspects, but rather there is complementarity. And the more we digitize these processes, we find that things work more efficiently. Like, for example, in some parts of our borders with our neighbors, we have created really one clearing house where, officials on one side of the border and on the other side, the opposite side, are in one place. And what is to be expected is very clear. Things come in, and whatever information that is required is delivered on spot, and people move with ease as long as they just make sure that what was expected of them has been done, and that is cross-checked on spot and using technology, and people and businesses and services move very fast. So it's not either or, but rather for me, it's how the two can interact and work together as fast as possible. We are not going to have purely one process and purely the other. It's how we can fuse, bring together the two and be able to move on. I think we are beginning to see development in this area and good progress.
That is very powerful, very well stated. It brings people together, and they don't have to be the same. They just have to be able to interconnect. And earlier in the conversation, you made the point that people need to be people are able to make money from this as well, which of course is one of the driving forces behind digitalization. It really increases productivity and money-making capacity and entrepreneurism, which are all so important to growth. President Kagame, I want to thank you very warmly for the conversation this morning. It's been enlightening, and I really appreciate your joining us. And good luck in all of your pursuits. Thank you.
Thank you, President Marpas. Thank you for your invitation. But above all, I want to thank you, I can't do it enough, and the World Bank for the very strong and beneficial partnership that has enabled us to invest in this critical infrastructure and skills that we need for continued digitization and the development of skills within our people, so that in the end, everyone will have what to do and benefit from, and it's what we want to be driven to achieve. Thank you so much.
We welcome that partnership and look forward to working with you every day and into the future. Thank you, sir.
Mtebaleko, I am Mpumza Esther in Uganda, and you are watching the World Bank Group IMF Spring Meeting.
Thank you both for that very interesting discussion. It is really inspiring to hear how, despite all challenges, Rwanda is making progress in increasing broadband connectivity and expanding digital inclusion. Now let's take a closer look at some more data on the digital divide and the provision of essential services. As we've heard, digital technologies can supercharge inclusive growth and bridge divides that were insurmountable with brick-and-mortar development solutions. Yet 3 billion people are offline, 96% of them in developing countries. For vulnerable populations, connection equals resilience. During the COVID-19 pandemic, about 60 developing countries leveraged digital payments to deliver social assistance programs. Countries that use digital identification and databases for government payments reached 39% more beneficiaries than those who did not. Digitalization of essential services also extended opportunities for health and education during lockdowns. Remote education kept students learning, with school closures affecting more than 1.6 billion worldwide. The global e-learning market, worth $250 billion in 2020, is expected to grow at more than 21% per year. And telemedicine connected many with essential care. Some analysts forecast the telemedicine industry will now grow by over 19% a year by mid-decade. In the post-COVID world, new skills will be required to seize on this digital transformation. 87% of companies worldwide say that they have a skills gap now, or will in the next 5 years. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, more than 230 million jobs will require digital skills by 2030. How can we ensure that digital solutions provide services to the poor, improve e-government efficiency, and build digital skills? Let's hear how governments are using digital technologies to advance the delivery of crucial services. For this conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Ghida Mazur, who is the Minister of Digital Transformation in Morocco. Enk Amgalan Lufsanseren is the Minister of Education and Science in Mongolia. And lastly, Karma Artigas is the Secretary of State for Digitalization and Artificial Intelligence in Spain. Due to some technical issues with the audio connection to Mongolia, we'll be running subtitles to ensure you can understand the Minister's comments. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm excited for our conversation. So let me start with Minister Mazur. Today, about 23% of public services are fully digitized in Morocco, but I understand that the ambition is to increase that to a full 100%. That's really ambitious. How do you plan to achieve that goal, and what difference will it make for the people of Morocco?
So the new model for development of Morocco insists on digitizing public services so that citizens can access public services in a way that's easy, transparent, and they don't have to physically go to administrations. The goal is to have trustworthy relationship between citizens and the administration in general. So our ministry works closely with various administration, giving them like day-to-day hands-on support on how to divide their digital vision, on how to simplify processes, of how to succeed in a digital transition that's citizen-centric.
Great. Thank you, Minister. It's really great to hear about the progress Morocco is making, but let's now turn to Mongolia. Minister Lufstansteren, how is Mongolia also using digital technology to improve delivery of public services?
Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and I'm very appreciated being a part of this meaningful meeting and discussion. So then, since 2019, and we all faced unexpected situation, and we have not accounted before. So then, COVID-19 pandemic, it creates a lot of risks, but at the same time it creates a lot of opportunities. We established newly a new ministry called the Ministry of Digital Development and Communication, November 2021. Okay, so then in 2020, Mongolian government set out its 5 years mission to build digital nation. The settling data and technology to facilitate innovation, streamline the public services, and diversify Mongolia's mining-based economy. Okay, so government of Mongolia launched e-Mongolia platform that provided most demand government services in 2020. Okay, so according to most current data, currently e-Mongolia platform, which is currently connected over 700 public services. The large number of online services has brought about massive benefit to Mongolia's people and businesses during the pandemic. The pandemic has been a great opportunity to us to shift more digital area than before.
Great. Thank you so much, Minister. As you point out, COVID certainly did create quite an opportunity. So we are at a pivotal moment for this digital revolution. But with that, there are risks that come with the expansion of digital technologies. So Secretary Artigas is an expert in building trust in digital development. Secretary Artigas, as you know, while digital technologies grew exponentially during the pandemic, so did cyber attacks. How can we protect citizens from the risks of this new digital world?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation of World Bank Group to this fantastic event. Yes, as you're really pointing out, for a Spain digital agenda, it is a priority that this transformation is inclusive and socially transformative. Because we firmly believe that the digitalization process can only be successful if it is able to improve social welfare, especially for those who need it most. And this is why we consider that all the digital agenda of Spain must put technology at the service of people and ensure that no one is left behind. We believe that technology can act really as a barrier against inequality. And we are at a time of unprecedented change in which we have the opportunity to lay the foundations for a digital society that must be fairer and more resilient to economic cycles. Of course, there are a lot of risks associated with the extremely growth of the digital, I would say, landscape. But we should solve that not only with awareness, but especially with training, with the promotion of digital skills. And this is why we are implementing a national plan for digital skills that is our pillar for digitalization strategy, beyond, of course, access to broadband, because fortunately Spain is at the leader of European countries in deployment of broadband. So we have a very good infrastructure, but we need to build 2 more additional infrastructures. And the next important additional infrastructure is infrastructure of talent, as well as infrastructure of innovation and entrepreneurship. But we are all aware that we must generate trust, generate a safe, reliable, and accessible environment for all the population. This is why we are having a pioneer project called the Charter of Digital Rights. Spain wants to be at the forefront in guaranteeing the rights of citizens in the digital world. For example, the right to equality or the right not to be discriminated by an algorithm. So really the challenge is what we call human-centered technology or technology and humanism. And we consider that to be really our own Spain's brand.
Thank you so much. Yes, with the digital rights, it's an important thing to make sure that it's safe and reliable, and we are excited by the innovations that you are leading on. So, Minister Mazur, let's turn to you on this. In Morocco, you have large rural populations and high illiteracy rates in some regions. So how is the government helping to boost digital literacy to prepare these populations for the opportunities and risks of digital development?
So first, I mean, Morocco also has a good ICT infrastructure. So the infrastructure and the coverage is the top 3 in Africa. So that means a lot of areas are already covered by internet. That's good. We're also still working on expanding the internet coverage. Also through schools, we have a Genie program, which equips schools in internet and devices, and also trains students in ICT tools so that they can teach their students. We work on all of this because we fully believe that that the entire society needs to benefit and be part of this digital transition.
Great to hear that Morocco is helping to lead the way in really accelerating that transition. So let me turn back to Mongolia. Minister, in Mongolia, you've really led the efforts to boost digital literacy and expand public education services, especially through the pandemic, through virtual learning. Can you tell us more about the challenges you faced and the opportunities that digital learning brings to the Mongolian people?
So COVID-19 pandemic continues to impose significant challenges to global economy and the governments. And as a result, humanity faces completely new way of life, and education and learning are different. Because so learning loss and setbacks children and young people are facing due to pandemic are immeasurable. And now we have challenging tasks to overcome implications and recover from the children's learning loss. Okay, as a result of the pandemic during last 2 years, academic year, almost 50% during total number of school days were delivered remotely and online to students in Mongolia. So therefore, to promote equal opportunities for children and youth and to recover their lost learning, and the Ministry of Education and Science of Mongolia has been trying to transform education utilizing digital advances and innovations. We all know that it works well. Around 1 million people access their learning, the MAMUL.AM platform we developed during the pandemic, indicating new form of the learning for children and youth. The Ministry of Education and Science of Mongolia has begun to develop classroom studios in schools, which is located in remote areas, to create e-content of the financial support of the state budget. These studios will enrich e-learning database, make full use of information technology in training, and ensure lesson and readiness in case of the emergency in the course of measure.
Thank you so much. It's critical that education, of course, can reach all. So this whole issue of access as well as quality sounds like that you are well aware and taking us forward in that realm. Secretary Artigas, if you could take out your crystal ball and look a bit into the future, tell me about how you see the potential of big data and artificial intelligence for advancing inclusive and resilient growth in developing countries.
We believe that digitalization and sustainable growth are two sides of the same coin. So increased productivity and efficiency are two elements on which developing countries have the opportunity to build a more prosperous model capable of generating wealth and well-being. It is clear that all the advances in efficiency gains from big data and AI are becoming essential to designing more sustainable and efficient production systems, and also everything related with the circular economy and the green transition must be empowered by big data and AI. It's estimated that 60% of potential productivity comes from actions focused on task automations, for example, and that artificial intelligence could also increase productivity up to 40%. So for me, this process must go parallel to the development of a new digital and green economy and the necessary ecological transition. We in Spain have the two leverages of our transformation and productive model are digital transformation and green transition. And I think that it is important international cooperation and the establishment of mechanisms for access to knowledge and the creation of secure and interoperable data spaces. AI requires data, and it's important that we find the ways in which different countries can exchange data in a safe way and trustful way. And also that at a national level, as we're doing in Europe, you build environments in which you create industrial data spaces for open innovation and AI development. But for me, there is an important premise, is that nobody should impose which technologies or application development countries should develop, because you also have the knowledge and expertise and the talent that if we devote the resources to grow that talent, there is no possibility of a technology colonization. So I think that an intelligent prospective digitalization for each country should be based on technology at service of people.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Artigas. So I have a final question for all of you in a kind of rapid round. I might turn to Minister Mazur first. If you were to ask one thing from the World Bank Group to help expand digital usage, what would it be?
Well, I can ask for many. So one of them is we have internet, but a lot of people don't have devices yet. So don't have 4G devices. If you can find a way to have these people have access to devices. So sharing this digital literacy programs, we have some of them. If we can expand this, that would be awesome. And also any expertise sharing from other countries and how to succeed this on a hands-on way of this expertise sharing would be very grateful for that.
Okay, fantastic. Let's turn to Mongolia. Minister Lusanstereng, what would you ask that one thing of the World Bank Group?
World Bank Group to support expansion high-speed internet connection throughout the country, as Mongolia is very remote and geographically broad country. Even through the pandemic, restrictions are getting looser, and we would like to continue to virtual learning as we have faced significant learning loss, particularly children and youth residing in the remote areas. Those are majority affected by pandemic because of the lack of accessibility of the online learning and need to overcome learning loss and accelerate the learning. Besides, the support of developing teachers, student digital literacy is crucial. As we have experienced in this challenge, in particular, teachers need competitive skills to access digital tools and produce digital content to promote student learning.
Super, thank you. And I turn to you, Secretary Artigas.
I really would encourage the World Bank to support all the initiatives that have to do with digital skills at any country, so that we can allow all the citizens in the world enjoy the advantages that technology may bring us. But also I would love to that they support the idea that technology development cannot be, it is not progress if it costs us a price. And we cannot do this development at the price of losing in this process rights that we have acquired through centuries as citizens. So we don't want to miss in the digital world those rights that we have in our current world. So I would encourage that they support also corporative policies in line with these principles and values, with the digital rights also for the citizens in the digital world. And that can be done also with private and public collaboration aligned with this objective to leave no one behind.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more about not leaving anyone behind in this amazing digital revolution that we find ourselves in. So thank you all for your expertise and your experience and for being with us here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation and I thank you. It's great to see how some countries are turning a challenging moment into an opportunity to advance digital inclusion. I'm joined now by Shri Sridhar, who's been following the conversation online and on social media. Shri, what have people been saying?
Thanks, Lana, and great to see you. So people are joining us from all over the world today, including Rwanda, Nigeria, France, India, Venezuela, Spain, Uganda, Mexico, and the United States. And they're using today's event hashtag, which is Power of Digital, to join the conversation on our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as Instagram channels. But what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the need for better and more connectivity, but also access to technology and digital skills, especially in developing countries. So I want to take a moment now to give a shout out to some of the comments that have been coming in on our social media channels. We have Lucy from Rwanda on Twitter who says that to achieve digital financial inclusion for all 1.3 people, every African of age must have equal and affordable access to a digital account and services that merit what it means to be truly included. Next on LinkedIn, we have a comment from Zaradeen Ahmed who says that there is a wide gap to bridge relating to digital infrastructure and internet access in the global south, particularly Africa. And to round this out on Facebook, a comment from Jubaida Begum who says that digital transformation is one of the best techniques to promote economic growth, and we should develop our skills so that we can properly use technology.
Great. It's great to hear all of those voices, and I think now we can share the results of the poll that we've been running throughout the event.
Yes, so let me remind everyone, today's poll asked which digital transformation do you think is the most critical to accelerate resilient and inclusive growth? We had 4 options here. Is it e-government and digital IDs, fintech and digital payments, digital infrastructure and internet access, or is it D, edtech and digital skills? Now, Lana, before we get to the results, what would be your pick here?
Well, I'm an education person, but I actually might go for E, all of the above.
Okay, I like that. I am going for A, but why don't we see how people voted? And just to note, we had over 2,400 people take part in today's poll. But here are the results here. 13% say it's e-government and digital IDs, 12% fintech and digital payments, 39% digital infrastructure and internet access, and finally 35% edtech and digital skills. So pretty close results here.
Great. Thank you so much, Shri.
Thanks, Lana.
Hi, my name is Patrick in Dublin, and you're watching the World Bank Group IMF Spring Meetings.
I'm now joined here in the atrium of the World Bank Group by Doyle Gallegos, Regional Program Manager for Latin America and the Caribbean for the Digital Development Practice of the World Bank, and Layla Search, Senior Investment Officer for FinTech Investments at IFC. They'll be answering some of the questions you've been asking in just a moment. But first, let's recap some of the main points we've heard from our speakers on how we can ensure a digital revolution that supports truly inclusive growth. Digital technologies offer an unprecedented opportunity to transform developing economies, enabling long-term growth and prosperity. Digital innovation is revolutionizing government, health, education, business, finance, and jobs. Yet too many people in developing countries remain unconnected or unable to reap the benefits of digital transformation. We need a collective commitment from the public and private sectors to close connectivity and usage gaps and build the foundations of a thriving, equitable digital economy for all, especially in times of economic shocks and upheaval. So now let's turn to our Q&A with our panel. You've been posting questions and voting on your favorites online, and Layla and Doyle are here today to answer some of the most popular. So up first, let's hear from Lukman Yusuf from Nigeria, who sent us this video.
Hello, my name is Lukman Yusuf from Nigeria, and I would like to ask the speakers this question. In what way can the government, institutions, and organizations complement the growing digital innovation with the knowledge required for full adoption by people in vulnerable communities with little knowledge of how to read or write to participate in the use of this technology? Thank you.
Doyle, so Lukman raises an important point about digital skills. Yep. What can be done about that?
Well, thank you, Luke. And this question goes to the heart of our biggest challenge right now. Right now, we need to find innovative ways to boost the usage of a beneficial internet for all. And when I mean all, I also include the disabled. And by disabled, we're talking about people with special needs, the elderly, as well as the illiterate. So what can we do? So technology can help us to a great extent. In fact, it's a big challenge because right now, WHO has estimated about 1 billion people in this population that are disabled. And if trends continue the way they are right now, by 2030, half the planet will be considered part of the disabled population. So yes, technology can help us solve a lot of this problem. But the grand irony is that many of the innovations we have today that can make a difference, there are barriers to bringing those technologies into our client countries because of obsolete regulations, policies. Standards don't exist for devices, for hardware, software, cloud services that can all be enabled to provide relief to these disadvantaged populations.
Great, thank you. And so over to you, Layla. We have a question from Nicholas who says, how can emerging digital tools help with global challenges like climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of digital tools that have the potential to scale solutions to solve problems, particularly in climate change. We're seeing these digital tools and these new business models really across all industries and sectors. We're seeing it in agriculture, we're seeing it in logistics, we're seeing it in energy, and IFC seeks out to both partner and invest in these type of companies that are making these changes. For example, in Kobo 360, an e-logistics company, they're using artificial intelligence to be able to smartly route trucks to cut down on emissions. Another example, Twiga. In the area of agriculture and food, it's been shown that artificial intelligence could cut down on food wastage by as much as 35 million pounds a year. And Twiga is just one of those companies. They also work in the supply chain to make that delivery much more efficient. And then lastly, in energy, where you're starting to see a shift to use of solar power, IFC's invested in a company called Solfacil that really enables both the distribution, the installation of solar on top of rooftops for consumers and small businesses. And I think these are just thousands of the types of innovations that we're seeing in digital tools that can help address climate change in emerging markets.
That's great. That's exciting. Some good news in the midst of everything that we're dealing with today. So back to you, Doyle. Yep. We have a question from Blossom via World Bank Live, who says, according to accounts of COVID's economic impact, advanced nations will recover by 2023, but for developing countries, that timeline will be much longer. So she wants to know, how can the World Bank, through its work in digital, help to narrow that recovery timeline for the low and middle income countries?
Yes, and in fact, it doesn't have to take that long. And what I mean is if we are successful in assisting our client countries on the acceleration to digital transformation, that time period can be very much reduced. So again, how do we do this? Well, if we don't do something now, the opportunity cost and the lost opportunity gets higher and higher every time we lag. So what it basically takes is governments coming together and thinking about a strategy. We assist these countries strategize. We look at the baseline. What are the diagnostics? What's the current situation? We will help them put their roadmaps to digital transformation. That's the easy part. The hard part comes when you have to identify the gaps in either policy regulation or standards so that you can close those and attract the private sector to come and invest and accelerate the whole process.
Great, thank you. So for you, Layla, we have a question from Shervon. Can you give some recommendations in the marketplace or fintech space for digital solutions that are affordable for emerging economies and communities trying to build solutions for the unbanked?
Yeah, and you know, historically, financial services have been expensive. And we also know from World Bank data that even though great progress has been made in the last 5 or 10 years, we still have as much as 33% of the world population, or 1.7 billion people, who don't even have access to a basic bank account. And why has it been so expensive? It's been so expensive because you needed the physical infrastructure to reach these people. You had to have bank branches. You needed to have agents in rural areas. You needed people to staff and to run loan documents and this type of stuff. And I think we've had a big digital revolution with both the fintech companies that are starting to enable that you can open a bank account virtually. You don't have to step foot in a bank. You can make payments. You can make your bill payments. You can apply for a loan. And all of this is being enabled by technology, which then cuts the cost and it makes it affordable. And I think during COVID, you even saw, you know, a complete revolution, almost a leapfrogging of the adoption of financial services digitally. People couldn't walk into banks. And then even more importantly, I think the regulators have started to catch up on this. So they were starting to enable regulation that allowed this virtual financial services, but COVID proved to them that they had to change even further. So in countries like Kenya, Uganda, and elsewhere, you can now virtually open a bank account by regulation without having to go into the bank. So I think this combination of both these new models and financial technology and using technology along with the regulators can really help us close this gap even more exponentially.
That's great. Thank you. So back to you, Doyle. We have a question from Mohammed. There is consensus that digital economic transformation is key to economic growth and job creation. However, in developing countries, basic digital infrastructure are lacking. So what sustainable countries can really help countries, sustainable strategies can help countries really overcome this challenge?
No, that's again, another great question, and it's really comforting to see that 39% of our respondents think that infrastructure is still quite significant. We at the bank believe that digital infrastructure is the foundation of foundations. If we don't get the digital infrastructure right, we have no digital disruptive technologies, we have no digital transformation, and we don't have a digital economy. So we have to get this right. The estimate is globally about $500 billion of private capital needs to be deployed to fill that infrastructure gap. So we assist our client governments really, again, try to understand where the gaps are, where the biggest needs are, and we help them revise regulations to really crowd in the private sector. And what does the private sector need? Well, we need to lower costs of fiber optic backbones. We need to do that through infrastructure sharing, lower costs of spectrum, more reasonable taxation. Once the infrastructure is built, we have to make it accessible to everyone, open access and non-discriminatory practices so that an entrepreneur or a large ISP, internet service provider, can come and provide services. And last of all, we really need the government and private sector to sit together, plan, prioritize where the infrastructure has to go, and make it happen. So.
Great, thank you. And so a last question for you, Layla, from Abdel. Is it possible for the digital revolution to facilitate job creation for young people in developing countries?
In short, absolutely. And this digital revolution has created so many job opportunities, but in different ways, in the digital economy, in digital companies. What we're seeing, I think, that helps create and helps make these jobs happen are two fronts, at least on the technology sector. And what you're realizing is that the education of yesterday no longer works for our young people of today in this digital economy. People need technology skills, they need data science skills, they need machine learning, they need internet marketing. And that can't be delivered fully in emerging markets by 4 to 6 year institutions where you need to have proximity to them. So IFC is doing a lot in that regard. We're doing a lot in what we call the edtech space. So we've invested in companies like Coursera and Kriana that are delivering real-time, just right content for the skill sets that are needed in today's economy, especially on the digital side. But then even more importantly, COVID has also changed the way people work, the way people hire, the way they find talent. And so there's also platforms that help with this matchmaking. You find companies now, digital jobs can be done virtually. So you can have talent of young people from Kenya, from Ukraine, working in companies in Brazil, in UK, in the US, and they can do it virtually, and they can also have that skill set delivered very quickly through these online platforms and education platforms. So I think it's created much more job opportunities, in fact, than ever before, where you had to be in physical proximity.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, we could talk about this for ages, but
Absolutely.
I just have to send you a big thank you for both of you, and also thank you to our viewers who asked all of our questions. So to finish off our program on a high note, let's see the digital revolution in action. In Cabo Verde, on the west coast of Africa, a digital health pass, which uses blockchain technology for verification, has boosted the uptake of COVID-19 vaccinations. Take a look.
O que me entusiasma sobre o minha carta é porque trabalhei num projeto que está a ajudar o país nessa nova reabertura econômica, possibilitando aos seus cidadãos fazerem o seu livre movimento, viajarem e apresentarem um certificado que eu e a minha equipa trabalhamos duro para garantir que é um certificado válido e que pode ser verificado em qualquer parte do mundo. Minha carta está a possibilitar a Cabo Verde a dar esse novo passo para o novo normal, essa reabertura econômica, trazendo confiança no estado da saúde.
O NHACARD é para além do Covid. Neste momento estamos a falar do Covid, mas o NHACARD visa transformar todo o setor da saúde, aproximando e ajudando o setor da saúde a entrar nessa transição digital. O nosso objetivo é que esse NHACARD acompanhe o cidadão para toda a vida.
Trabalhar neste projeto foi muita satisfação para mim, porque senti que dei um contributo muito grande para o país e para essa reabertura econômica, mas sobretudo para a liberdade das pessoas do livre movimento em uma forma segura.
Sabadi! Hello! I'm Noidalai Manosak in Vientiane, Lao PDR, and you are watching the World Bank Group IMF Spring Meeting.
Now, this marks the end of our Spring Meetings event, but there's so much more to come, including tomorrow's event on financing climate action. Then on Friday, the focus turns to helping communities living in fragile or conflict-affected situations. Also, you can also catch a replay of both this event and yesterday's discussion between the bank and IMF leaders on responding to global shocks, all at live.worldbank.org. And please remember to share your comments on today's event using the hashtag #PowerOfDigital and any of these flagship events using the hashtag #ResilientFuture. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed the discussions and perhaps learned something new. From everyone here in the atrium of the World Bank Group in Washington, D.C., goodbye.